Chris Speaks back here today with Brandon Mosley for our BCS State of Ireland podcast, and we've got U.S. Senate hopeful Congressman Barrymore with us today. Congressman, before we get started, I have to forgot to tell you that my boyhood hero, the an iconic figure in Alabama politics, the legendary Bill Baxley, wanted me to tell you hello.
Bill's a fantastic human being, and he's a dear friend, Chris. We as a family love that guy, and just can't say enough good things about him. He's a Democrat, but I can tell you he's a good man. He's a good,
Well,
good man.
when I told him I was interviewing you, he said, that iconic or that voice. He said, I like Barry Moore. He said, I like Barry Moore a lot. He said, I don't like any of his politics, but I like Barry Moore.
That's right. We policy wise, we're probably a little far apart, but as far as a good human being, you couldn't ask for a better man than Bill Baxley.
So, Congressman, let me ask you this. The last couple cycles we've seen like, Congressman Moore and Congressman Byrne run for Senate. What more can a senator get accomplished that maybe a congressman couldn't?
Well, as a member of the Senate, obviously you're one of 100, right? Instead of
Mm-hmm.
435. And a U.S. senator can actually stop a piece of legislation. We saw it. You actually can, if you contest something, you can actually hold it up until you get agreements. In the House, that's not the way it works most of the time. And so it's tough sometimes to move the needle on policy in a direction that you favor because you just don't have the ability to hold things up. And I think one other thing too, Chris, is that the House, you typically have a district of 800,000 people depending on, and you're more vox populi, voice of the people. In the Senate, you more take a position of the state, right? So the state's concerns are your fight. And so it's a little different fight, obviously, in the Senate because you're like as the Alabama senator, you're actually concerned about the state's entire interest, whereas a member of the House, you're concerned about your district a lot of times. So you have to work well with the Senate, you have to work well with the House, you have to work well with other members, but I think it gives you have a little different perspective, a little different job, I think.
Congressman, what's your view on the filibuster? I mean, the right now for the viewers that don't know, if you don't have, it takes 60 votes to end the filibuster by the minority party. Whether that's Republicans or Democrats. Right now, it's the Democrats in the minority. And 60 out of 40 is kind of high standard. It's like in the House, if 213 out of versus 212 or something, yeah, that one vote can decide to pass legislation if the leadership wants to move it. In the Senate, I mean, you have to have every Republican and then like six or seven Democrats in order to allow there to even be a vote on something.
Yeah, Brandon,
We
I'm at a
change that or
point.
not?
Yeah, I'm at a point right now, Brandon, on this filibuster. I think we need to nuke it. And the reason I say that is, in Trump's first term, the House spent months and weeks investigating Trump. They impeached him twice. And now we know the Russian collusion stuff. All of that crossfire hurricane stuff was a bunch of hoaxes, but it was the Democrats' party way of slowing President Trump's America First agenda and crippling him and his administration. And of course, they began to arrest everybody around him. And so I'm at a point right now, if we want to really move his agenda without it, I think Schumer shuts the government down every time he gets an opportunity. He's already done it one time, a historic shutdown just before Christmas. And he's going to continue to do that because he'll get six or seven Democrats that'll stand with him. Even when the majority of the Republican Party, every single one of them want to move the government forward, Schumer's going to use the leverage of six or seven Democrats to shut the government down, to slow the America First agenda. And look, Sinema and Manchin were the two holdouts to nuke the filibuster last time. They're both gone from the Senate. And so I don't know that the willpower, I don't know if we've got the Republican will in the Senate right now to nuke the filibuster, but I think Coach has mentioned this, the president's mentioned this, and I mentioned this. If we really want to secure the U.S. elections, if we really want to get some of the things that the president wants to do done towards moving appropriations processes and stopping this continuing resolution of kicking the can down the road, we're going to need to nuke the filibuster. And we don't have a lot of time to do that. We're coming into before the midterms, I think we need to try to punch it out. And I think the way you do that is you nuke the filibuster and you let a simple majority in the Senate move the needle. Now, whether or not Rand Paul will go along with us, I don't know. But there's a couple of holdouts probably in the Senate that even if we nuke the filibuster, may not be with us every time, but at least we would have Republicans in control. And the American people sent a pretty clear message in November that that's what they want. And I think the fact that the president won a majority of the popular vote, he won all the swing states, 74 million people voted for him. I think it's incumbent upon us to move the needle and do what we got to do to move his agenda.
Congressman, during your time in office, is there any signature legislation that you worked on, um, or what was the most important one?
Yeah, so I've actually, Chris, it's interesting, but I actually had Joe Biden sign a bill into law for veterans. And, that was under a Democrat controlled House, Democrat controlled Senate, Democrat controlled White House. And so getting bills like that across the finish line, and I've introduced some pretty darn good bills. I've had two or three in the Senate, again, that we haven't been able to move, probably because of the filibuster. But and I don't know if Joe signed the bill, Chris, or if the auto pen signed it, but I do know for a fact it is law. And so, that's being able to do that. And I've got a bill right now that if we catch a illegal alien drinking and driving in this country, we can move them out of the country. I took it through Judiciary Committee. I took it through the floor. We passed it to the House. Actually, I think I had 30 or 40 Democrats vote with me in the House of Representatives. It's sitting in the Senate now. And that, we all kind of thought that was common sense, right? I mean, if you're here illegal, you're drinking and driving, we catch you, you're going out of the country. But under the prior administration, I had judges actually tell me this, that they would have somebody in their courtroom convicted of a DUI. They're here illegally, and then they would turn them over to ICE. They'd drive down the street and turn them loose again. And so they would reoffend. And so that, and then I moved the bill a few weeks ago to outlaw trans surgeries on minors in this country, and took it through judiciary, got it through the House. It's in the Senate. So these are things that we don't think kids need to be getting these hormones, these body parts chopped off, at least until they're age 19 in America. And so those are things that I think the American people probably agree with, and it's things that we need to get done. But again, with the Senate right now, and so yeah, I've had about 19 bills I've introduced. I've had one signed into law. I've got two sitting in the Senate right now.
Congressman, the president has consistently said that the United States needs possession of Greenland, to secure those resources and effectively defend, that territory against the Chinese or the Russians or whoever might covet those materials. Denmark keeps saying they're not selling, they're not giving up, and I mean, without the United States backing, Denmark would have a hard time holding that against you, me, and Christopher. How long are we going to just let Denmark do what they want to here, or is this something that we may need to be a little bit forceful with?
I don't know if you know this about President Trump, but he can be pretty forceful sometimes, Brandon. And I think that, and I understand if you look at Greenland, obviously its position, it's not that far from the coastal United States, and it's very near the North Pole, but it's a barrier between us and Russia and some of the bad actors in our hemisphere. And so I think that's not so much about, there's probably a lot of natural resources there. I don't know. But I think it strategically is very important. And look, we bought the West Indies from Denmark in the first part of the 20th century, and that it's now called the U.S. Virgin Islands. So it wouldn't be the first time we've purchased property from Denmark, and I think that in many ways, I understand strategically we need to do that. There's no way we can have Russia or China just very close to the northern part of the United States and access to our borders. And so, we'll see what happens. I think there will continue to be political pressure applied, and there's some things we can do. Obviously, I think that the president has at his disposal to encourage the governor, the government, and I think honestly, I think the people of Greenland can vote to sell to us. And so I'm sure there's pressure being applied from a lot of different angles. We'll see how it works out. The president's foreign policy has been amazing. And he continues to move the needle in ways that I think he's playing chess where a lot of people are playing checkers. And so we'll see how it shakes out. But I think we'll continue to see if there's diplomatic pressure, maybe some economic pressure, and maybe opportunities for Denmark to say, hey, this makes sense. They consider us an ally now.
Congressman, we've seen representatives and senators get upset because the president has not briefed them on what he was going to do militarily. Is that something the president should do? I mean, because I hear him all the time say we don't want our enemies to know where we're going to strike.
Yeah, no, he has. I think it's 30 or 45 days once he makes a move with the military to notify Congress. He's done that every single time, and like I know, these many of our soldiers and our operations would be put at risk if we notified some of the people in Congress. I don't think, especially on the left. I mean, they would preempt any strike we have, and they would endanger our soldiers and cripple our foreign policy and our ability to move the needle in areas like what we did recently in Iran with that nuclear attack. We just took out their weapons. I mean, we did it in 31 hours over and back, something like that. Same with Maduro, going in and grabbing him. He was wanted. I mean, the Democrats had a $25 million reward on his head. And so the fact that we went in and snatched him and didn't until we got him out, and then the president notified Congress, and that's what his job's to do. So I think it's dangerous if we start telling everybody what we're going to do. What's the point of having stealth craft and stealth operations if you're notifying the enemy you're coming?
Congressman, the president, since he's got into office, has been trying to negotiate a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. The Russians seem to just want more territory than even what they're occupying. Are we in a sort of a position where we have to back Ukraine with, continue backing them financially with military weapons unless the Russians, will come to terms and present a, peace deal that, Ukraine and the rest of Europe can live with?
We are kind of at a point right now. We've been involved over there for some time, and I was concerned early on, Brandon. I didn't vote to send any of the money to Ukraine because we had sent so much money over there, $176 billion with no oversight, and I think in a lot of ways that the money flowing out of this country is coming back to the pockets of some of these politicians and some of these people that are not necessarily got America's best interest. They got personal interest or financial interest in those fights. And so I voted against that time and time again. But I think we're President Trump and obviously Putin, he has a mindset that he wants the former Soviet Union under his reign to be restored. So that, like you're right, Brandon, that's grabbing more land. We'll see how it plays out. I think President Trump has he's like I said, he's a master negotiator. I think by crippling Venezuela's oil to Cuba and to China, Russia's not going to be able to help China as much with resources. And certainly, I think in some ways, um, the things we've done with Nord Stream pipeline cripples Russia in a lot of ways. And I think that we'll see. We're at a point that we want the Ukrainian people to be free. And I don't know what that looks like going forward. Like I said, I've been concerned early on. I had people briefing me, military soldiers. We were delivering equipment in fields in Ukraine that were disappearing the next morning, and we don't know where it wound up. And so, it if we're going to be involved, I think the president understands, and I think many of us in Congress understand there needs to be oversight. And what is the game plan? We basically, it seems like Biden kind of called a play. We've inherited a game that we've got to finish, and whatever's best for the U.S. interest is what we need to do. I don't think Russia taking over Ukraine is in our interest, but at the same time, where are we? At what point do we say, okay, we don't need to push forward on this? And so I'm going to leave that up to obviously Secretary Rubio and President Trump. But at this point, it seems like Russia didn't move as quickly and as rapidly as they thought they might. In the Ukraine, this thing is drug out. It's costing a lot of lives, and I think President Trump's doing what he can. He's offered Putin a couple of different deals, and hopefully he can negotiate peace there. He's done it. I think he's gotten us out of 7 wars already in less than 13 months. So Not us, but necessarily he's brought peace to regions of the country. And one of the fascinating things for me is when President Trump got elected, one of the first speeches he gave to Congress, he was talking about tariffs, and he said, I had two countries. He didn't tell us who they were, but he said, I had two countries they've been warring for a long time. And he said, I went to the president, I called one of the president of the countries. I said, if you go to war, it's 200% tariff. He called the other president of the country, said the other nation. He says, if you go to war, it's 200% tariff. And they walked away from the table of war and there was peace in the region. So, again, he's working some deals. I think he's trying to get Putin to agree to peace. And we don't know what that looks like. He'll obviously have to work with the Ukrainian government to see what they're willing to do to settle this thing. But I think there's been a lot of death and destruction with no clear winner at this point.
Congressman, in an interview I had in the past with Congressman Brooks, he explained to me how the debt was our biggest threat. Um, do you foresee Congress ever tackling this issue?
Yeah, honestly, Chris, we're the first Congress in a couple of decades that are moving approach bills. The way it was originally set up for Congress to do was to pass approach bills, the 12 approach bills, get them over to the Senate, and then come to conference and settle on agreements. And those are usually cut through committees and so this appropriations process, and actually where we're putting downward pressure on spending, we're seeing that right now in Congress. And so we, if we can get our 12 out, the Senate's got, I think they've got three of theirs passed. And so I think going back to the approach process, I think it's part of that. And I think if you look at just Scott Bessent said that he thinks that 10% of the federal spending is fraud right now. And you're talking about, 3 trillion a year, 4 trillion a year. That's a big number. And I think between tariffs, Trump said this last Monday when he met with us, he said that in the recent modern history of this country, we had only taken in $3 trillion in the best year. He said this past 12 months, at the end of the year, he looked, they'd taken in 18 trillion into the US. Our national debt's 38 trillion. It's $105,000 a second the interest on that. And so I think if we see where we're bringing resources in, and the beauty of the tariffs is it's encouraging companies to produce in America, and it's creating American jobs, which that money turns over in the economy. If we're going to fix this, I think GDP, waste, fraud, and abuse, and U.S. production, opening up energy, which we're seeing gas prices, I think 2.49 a gallon right before the holidays. Low energy cost allows us to produce more competitively. And so I think there's an opportunity, Chris, to right the debt. But I think through the appropriations process, through negotiations on tariffs, through foreign investment where we're actually producing in America, and management of the resources that are in America, to lower inflation, but to also stop the fraud. I think there's a path forward for us to fix this. And I think that we've got there's actually a light at the end of the tunnel on this thing. And I couldn't be more pleased with Scott Bessent's monetary policies, President Trump's business savvy, and the way we're negotiating deals and producing. There's an opportunity for this country to land on its feet. It's going to take some time. We didn't get this way overnight. It's been a couple of decades since we actually went through an approach process.
Congressman, there were peaceful protests last week in Iran, people wanting change, wanting the economy to turn around. And President Trump warned the Iranian regime not to, crack down on the protesters. And they ignored those warnings. According to what, the best numbers I could find last night, they've murdered 492 protesters, and there's 10,600 that have been jailed. And of course, the protesters have responded, with arson and, fighting back against, the authorities. If that situation continues to melt down, is there a point where Trump's going to have to carry out his threats and conduct strikes on that government?
I wouldn't be surprised, Brandon, if we don't get to that point. But, I think the one thing we all understand, and I think Iran certainly understands, is that you don't mess around and find out with President Trump. If he tells you he's going to do something, he may give it a little time, but it seems like to me every time he said he's going to do something, he's done it. And if Iran's smart, they'll let these people have their liberty, and hopefully we can topple this regime, and put put back in the Shah's son, and let him take back over. I mean, and the people are hungry for freedom in Iran. All they've seen is since 1979, they've seen freedom around the world in places like America and different countries. They've longed for that, and but they've never experienced it. And I think we're seeing that needle move. And there's a chance that President Trump will have to do something to help push it across the finish line. But right now, I think he's using most of the resources he has in his arsenal, diplomatic, maybe some operations on the ground to help some of the people trying to overthrow the government. And look, like I said, you can't bet against President Trump, number one, and number two, when he tells you he's going to do something, he often does it, especially when it comes to foreign policy. He may not do it on a timeline that you and I may necessarily recognize, but like I said, a lot of times he's playing the long game on these things. But we'll see what he has to do and what he does. But if they keep slaughtering those people, they're putting themselves in a precarious situation with the president of the United States.
Congressman, kind of on the same line with protests, we're seeing leftists come out here and are more, I guess, aggressive now with our ICE agents. The woman tried to run over the woman the other day. Should we start handling these people more heavy-handed? I mean, I know we don't want to encroach on somebody's First Amendment right, but this seems like dangerous for our officers.
Yeah, I think we have to send a message, right? I mean, the mostly peaceful protesters, they burned cities when Black Lives Matter was doing what they were doing in this country. And very often, I think our government is feckless, and especially when it achieves a political agenda. And the left in this country is obviously undermining law enforcement. And they're putting not only the protesters in grave danger, but they're putting law enforcement. Just like if you got leaders of this country saying fight back and push back and attack law enforcement, and then the people go out and do it. Number one, the elected officials that are doing that sort of thing, they need to be censured. They need to be held accountable. But when they put people in danger, I think it's not good for our communities. Certainly not. And it's odd to me that most of these sanctuary cities, I think President Trump's talked about cutting off some of the money to these sanctuary cities. I think that's good. I mean, if you're going to attack federal law enforcement, don't take federal money. I mean, and if you don't like federal law enforcement, then change laws that change what we do. But right now, they are simply enforcing the laws on the books, and to have politicians and protesters and leftist groups funding this, whether it's Soros or whoever, I think that we're in our rights to go in and clean those places up. And again, it's unfortunate that we're seeing it come to this. I mean, but you can't step on the gas with an ICE agent standing in front of your car and not expect something to happen. I mean, you just don't do that. And we actually, in the video I saw, the wheels of the car actually spun, so she stepped on the gas pretty aggressively. And so, I think you play with fire, you get burnt. It's an old saying. But President Trump, Tom Homan, Kristi Noem, they're dead set on getting people that are here illegally out of this country. And I noticed yesterday that President Trump did away with asylum claims for a lot of the Somalians. And so, I mean, they're bringing some of this on themselves. The fraud obviously created a reason for us to go in and look at it. And now that they're being held accountable, they're throwing fits. But it's not a wise thing to do to take on federal law enforcement when they're there under the protection of the law to clean up your communities from people who are obviously creating fraud. And what's crazy, we were in judiciary yesterday, and we were literally working on a bill to get people out of this country who are here illegally, who have committed fraud, and the Democrats are fighting us every step of the way. So the Democrats are against everybody. They're for everybody that's not American. And right now, the Republican Party, we are here for the American people, and we're going to enforce the rule of law. And we're going to continue to do that until we clean some of this mess up that was created under Biden's prior 4 years of the Disney fast pass on the border and instant asylum claims without court hearings. And so we're going to clean the mess up. But it's just going to be unfortunate that there are people on the left out there that have Trump derangement syndrome and will endanger themselves and their own communities for a political agenda.
Congressman, recently President Trump announced that Space Command was coming to Huntsville. what all was involved with you and the delegation in convincing, the Pentagon and the president that this was in America's best interest?
Well, I think initially when President Trump created Space Command and the Space Force, he saw the who controls the high ground wins the wars, and so space is part of the new frontier for combat. And so he and in his first term when he created that, they went through an evaluation process, Brandon, and the Alabama won the first time hands down, and then there was, well, we need some different parameters. Alabama won the second time hands down, and so for national security purposes, it made sense for it to be in Alabama, primarily in the Huntsville area, because of the defense industry, the rocket industry, everything we've got there. The technology are quite amazing in Huntsville, and so Biden made a political move and moved it to Colorado, who came in fifth, but they were the first Democrat state that made the top five, and so he moves it to Colorado, and so our delegation under the Biden administration, and I was here from 2020 right on through. And to Chairman Rogers' credit and to our delegation, we stuck together and did not let them put any, they didn't, we let them put a footer in the ground in Colorado. They leased buildings. We didn't give them the money to build anything because we knew that that was a political thing. It wasn't the best interest of the country. So when President Trump came back in, as a delegation, we had held up the funding to make sure that there wasn't any, like I said, no permanent structures built, no investment in Colorado. And so once we got President Trump back in, we went back to the original plan, which was the right plan for America, the right plan for national security. It worked out for Alabama, and we were able to fund and start construction in North Alabama. And so it was a process of us just holding the line for 4 years under the prior administration until President Trump came back in. And thank goodness he won the election. If he hadn't won the election, we probably would not have Space Command in Alabama.
There's another quick question for you. Talking about him winning the election and the left. Are we no longer in a Democrat versus Republican fight? Is this now good versus evil?
It's absolutely a spiritual battle, Chris, for the future of the nation, and it's good versus evil. And when you see, and I say this all the time, you know it's a spiritual battle when you got the pro-Palestine trans movement, all on the same. Normally they'd be killing each other.
Yeah.
The Islamists would be killing the gays and vice versa, kind of maybe. But that tells you when you got those allies, the only thing that could be is a spiritual, because there's nothing politically they align on. And even the feminists in this country are not defending girls in sports right now against guys. The feminists in this country are really, really quiet when the women's rights are being trampled by Palestinians and Islamists. And so it tells you it's a spiritual battle because normally they would be diametrically opposed politically.
Congressman, there's been a lot of talk about, six laning I-65 all the way from Mobile to the Tennessee line. Portions of it have been done, but a lot of that is still four lane. And like it really ties up on like summer weekends and whatnot as people go to the beach or come back from the beach. A lot of them just people passing through Alabama. Do we have money to do that at the federal level, or do we need to be more focused on things like deficit reduction rather than big infrastructure projects?
Yeah, so it's a battle, Brandon, right? I mean, it's actually you have to look at it from a standpoint, and as a conservative, and I'm the most conservative guy in our delegation according to CPAC, but if you look at it, we agree in securing this nation and defense issues as conservatives, and certainly infrastructure investment that grow the economy. The problem is we have so much waste, fraud in between there and abuse that I think if we would clean up the waste, I mean, the 10% the percent saying that was probably that money is wasted and is fraudulently taken, and then some of these crazy programs that we're funding in foreign countries. I think there is a way to focus on infrastructure in America, and it's going to be a gradual. We got to softly land this airplane. We got to make sure we invest in infrastructure. I think we have to make sure we bring technology into this country. We have to make sure that we make wise decisions going forward that will grow the economy. And so there's a balance. I think we slow in inflation. We're seeing that by not printing money. Then we're managing the money that we have available. And over time, I think you can lower the deficit, grow the economy, and help the GDP help produce excess revenues. And so it's going to take some time. We didn't get here overnight. It's been 20 years, like I said, it's been 2 decades since we've actually done appropriations processes, but there is a balance, and I think investment in infrastructure as conservatives, and I always say there's no government program like a job. And so what we can do to invest and make high paying jobs in the state of Alabama and even the federal level where we're bringing companies and foreign investment, the 18 trillion that President Trump talks about coming to America. Over time, Brandon, we can fix this. You can't just spend money you don't have, but I think you have to do a balanced process of cutting spending, just like any house would. You lower but you invest in things that are going to make long-term revenue producers. And so, obviously, I-65 is a huge problem. I travel the state a lot, and it is always congested. And if we want to grow, we've got to have Alabama in a position to grow. But I think it's going to be a partnership between federal and state monies to make I-65 a good thoroughfare for industry and for exports. And we just deepened the port. You know, Richard Shelby worked for decades, so we have an incredible port on the south end of the state. But we'll need to be able to move those goods and services north through the state of Alabama. And so infrastructure is part of that. President Trump's committed to helping with the bridge at I-10. He's already put 550 million this past year in that. And so he understands, as we all do, that you can invest money wisely and you can produce jobs in industry that are going to grow the economy, that'll produce the revenue to offset some of the debt. At the same time, stop spending money with fraudulent people who are here, stop buying votes with taxpayer money, and funding people who are not here for the best interest of the country.
So we've kept you over 30 minutes. I really appreciate your time. Is there anything else you would like to add?
No, sir, Chris, thank you. Appreciate it, Brandon. Hope y'all are doing well, and y'all keep our nation in your prayers.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman, for being on.
Yes, sir.